Well, today is a big day. It's January 20th. We are here for episode 398 of Cincinnati Soccer Talk. We're celebrating the life and remembering the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We just had a transfer of power in the White House earlier today. And Cincinnati, FC Cincinnati, our team flies to Florida to start the preseason with a few empty seats on that plane with a few players still holding out. We'll get into that and more with our team here at Cincinnati Soccer Talk. Let me bring in our team. Jason Ashcraft, we're going to start with you, man. You got a pretty fresh, clean look there. Clean shaven now.
Like I told you before, once a year is probably good to just clear cut it and let it all grow back, But I always pick the worst possible time of year to take the insulation off my face because it is cold.
Nothing like negative 12 degrees to shave your face, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, glad you're here, Jason. Looking forward to getting into today's episode with you. Jeremy Lance is back. It's been a while, man. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. It has been a while, but though it is super cold out, I'm already kind of got my mind set towards the season as we get ready to embark here.
Fantastic. And we have another new player on our team here as we talk about bringing new guys into the squad, some trialists with FC Cincinnati. We've got a new guy bringing in here, Nick Morgan. Nick, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, guys. Happy to be here. Happy to be talking some FCC with you guys. And unlike some players on the FCC roster, if you expect me to be here, I will show up and be here on this podcast.
Fantastic. That's what we like about you, Nick. Hey, before we get too far into the show, tell us a little bit about yourself because you've got some sports journalism experience, some podcasting experience. And though you're new to Cincinnati Soccer Talk, this whole gig is not new to you. Share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, for the two of you out there who may be crossover NHL Nashville Predators and FC Cincinnati fans, I was host of the Locked On Predators podcast, covering the NHL for 3 seasons. Also wrote for On the Forecheck and Penalty Box Radio. Before that, I was a sports producer in Atlanta where I was lucky to cover Atlanta United's first season. Always a soft spot for Miggy Almiron in my heart of hearts. And in that time, I also moved to Cincinnati and became a loyal FCC season ticket holder. One of my best friends when I moved up here was a big FC Cincinnati fan. Had season tickets all the way back in the USL years. Took me to my first game. And after that, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm all in on this. And then as soon as that season ticket deposit popped up for the inaugural MLS season, I was like, count me in. So happy to be here. Happy to be talking about what I consider my team. So, yeah, thank you for the warm welcome, everybody, and happy to be working with you guys.
For sure. Jason, did you hear him say Nashville in there in that introduction?
I did, but it was hockey related. And
yeah.
I am a Blue Jackets fan, kind of, but they usually stink, so I have no ill feelings towards the Predators or anything.
I will leave out the fact that of all the NHL teams, I probably hate Nashville almost the most out of all. Them and the Red Wings are right there as the 2 teams I hate the absolute most. Just their entire existence hate. But we'll leave that out.
I don't know that we should. I like having you and Nick on for this show. This should be fun.
Yeah, if we got time at the end for some NHL hot takes, let's go at it.
Sounds good. I'll go get my Calgary Flames hat on.
There we go.
I'll go get my Seattle Kraken hoodie on, and we can. Yeah,
I'll just keep talking FC Cincinnati because hockey's outside of my existence here right now. So, speaking of hot takes and cold weather, we want to give a shout out to Apollo Home, our show sponsor. With temps well below freezing right now, temps have plummeted, and we warned you all year long to keep things cozy with Apollo Home. Peace of mind is worth the $29 tune-up. Get our great sponsor on your schedule soon. So thank you, Apollo Home, for your sponsorship year after year of Cincinnati Soccer Talk. We truly appreciate you and all you do and allow us to do here on the show. Guys, let's get into some training camp news here. It's been a big week if you've been following the news out of FC Cincinnati camp. Who's there, who's not there, some we expected, and maybe 1 or 2 surprises since we last talked. So let's get into the guys that, at least initially, did not report. We expected Lucho Acosta not to be there. Luca Orellano was a bit of a surprise, but we've learned that he's since joined camp on Friday, and we'll get into that here in just a moment. And Yuya Kubo, you guys a little surprised by Kubo not showing up?
Yeah, that was the big surprise, right? Like you said it. Lucho, we kind of knew. Is he going to show up? Is he still holding out? Luca, rumors had just kind of started to come out that there's some clubs like Cruz Azul pursuing him. There was nothing. There was no other chatter about Yuya Kubo being unsettled. Like he was Mr. FC Cincinnati for life guy over here that we thought was just going to keep getting these 1-year contracts till he was 45. And to have his name be thrown out there as someone who didn't show up it came out of left field to us. You do wonder how much this was out of left field for the front office.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wonder about that too. With Noonan, we'll get into some of Noonan's comments. He thought it was really disappointing, right, that these guys didn't show up. I wonder how much there's question of are we not hearing the whole story? Which obviously we're not. They're talking about handling things internally, and how much did Chris Albright know? How much are they blaming Chris Albright? Who knows what's happening? I know there was a dispute with. Or some confusion, I guess, with Luca Orellano, maybe his contract. I think the quote that came out said something about he was expecting an increase in pay based on performance, but it wasn't spelled out in that report that I saw if that was a misinterpretation or if that was a promise that wasn't fulfilled.
And this was the contract extension he just signed. Like this is not like something from years ago that he forgot that he glossed over in the paper. This is from a brand new contract.
Yeah. Nick, you a little surprised about Orellano not being there? Well, he's there now. He's there now, but initially
you can a little surprised, but you can understand. This is a guy that I think a lot of people, when we were talking about Orellano's future last year, was saying, okay, well, once we purchase his contract, maybe we work him up towards, a DP level. Maybe he takes a DP spot. And I think he heard that too. To me, this might just be sort of a miscommunication, or maybe just a couple of things that we expected to happen earlier in the offseason not happening yet. It took until today to get the Alvaro Barreal deal, finalized. The Lucho situation still in flux. There's not a lot that Albright can do in terms of money until those two things were taken care of. So I'm not totally surprised about Orellano just kind of taking the week off until that's fixed. But it seems like maybe there's some sort of understanding between Albright and Orellano's camp now.
Yeah. Let me read this quote from Pat Noonan. He said, "It's disappointing, certainly for what we expected to get us started and starting off on the right foot. There's been discussions, but we'll handle those more internally." There you go, and move forward. But disappointing, they're not here. He said, like I said, it's disappointing. There's a lot of guys that would love different contracts, different situations, but they showed up. Whether you like it or not, they have an obligation to show up. And in that time frame, you hope to find solutions for things that you might not see eye to eye on. So for me, you have a job and you show up for your job, whether you like how things are going or not, and respect your teammates, your coaches, the club in a way that shows that despite not being pleased, you're going to be a pro, a good pro. So it sounds like Pat Noonan's a little hot about these guys not showing up without permission to be away from the club, right? Is this a big deal? We see this in sports leagues all over the world. We're maybe beginning to see it for the first time with our team here in Cincinnati. Nick, is this a big deal or is this no big deal?
To me, it's a big deal based on the timing and the players involved. Lucho Acosta doesn't show up. Not really a surprise to any of us, right? I think we knew going in that was probably a strong possibility. The more the year went on, Lucho Acosta seemed to have played his last game for FCC. After Lucho, who's the best pure playmaker on the roster? It was Luca Orellano, right? He was the guy that until FCC figures out their number 10 future, he was the guy that's going to be counted on to create a lot of this offense, part of which happens to be getting your new DP striker the ball. And then on top of that, after that, Yuya Kubo, who other than Nick Hagelin has been the one constant in the FCC roster almost since the beginning of their MLS tenure, he doesn't show up. That's a guy that played a lot of positions. That was the utility guy that could come in anywhere and fill a gap when needed. And now all of a sudden in a off season in which you have absolutely, I mean, do any of us really have any idea what the formation's going to be, what players are going to play where? We just kind of counted on Yuya Kubo being somewhere out there to fill a gap and playing well. And now all of a sudden he's not here. To me, that's a big deal. It is a year of transition in which FCC is going to need to get the players that they currently have on the roster and figure out how to best use them until they get some of their front office roster management issues fixed. And them not having it right now, yeah, to me, that's a big deal.
You make a good argument, my friend. I think Pat Noonan's thinking through all of that as well. How are we going to play? Who are we going to play through? All of that. Jason, what do you think? Is this no big deal? Is it as big a deal as we're making it out to be?
I don't think it's a huge deal at the moment. We knew about Lucho, I think, going in. Lucho, I think everybody's kind of resigned to the fact that he's not coming back, and the front office seems to be moving on from him. It is surprising. I will hand you all that. It is surprising that Luca and Kubo did not return in a timely manner. But as you said before, Brian, like this happens a lot in other leagues. I mean, just the beginning of this Bengals season, we had Jamar Chase not showing up to training camp because he wanted more money. He wanted a contract. And as MLS evolves and as more money is being spent on these players, I can certainly see this becoming a trend around the league as we get ready for the season. It is surprising a little bit, but I mean, in a sense, put yourself in Yuya Kubo's shoes, right? This guy was a DP. He got his contract renegotiated, took a pretty sizable pay cut, had 1-year extensions, it seemed like, every year. Then he comes out last year and has, for all intents and purposes, a career season. I think he broke his own personal scoring record. He was the offense for FCC for the most part. Do you really, I mean, if his contract was up after 1 year and or his pay increases weren't in there based on performance, maybe that's what he's doing. He's holding out for a little bit more cash. I don't blame him. I mean, the guy has clearly showed that he's capable of being a solid player in MLS. He could go back to Japan and probably be a solid player for any team there if he really wanted to. It's, to me, a negotiating tactic. Surprising, yeah. A big deal at this moment, no. If it goes on another 2 or 3 weeks, then I think that's when I would be kind of worried.
Here's my counter to the fact that this happens in sports. You know, you mentioned Jamar Chase. What happened the first couple weeks of the Bengals season?
And where are they now?
Yeah,
right?
It wasn't great. I mean, they lost to a team in the week 1 that had a very strong shot at the number 1 overall pick, and that wound up being the difference between them making the playoffs and not. Jamar Chase wound up turning it on as the season goes on, but those first couple weeks for him and that Bengals offense weren't great. So you go to this from a FCC standpoint, yeah, there's a lot of preseason left to play, but you also have a pretty tough schedule to start the year, not only with the Champions Cup, but your first games against Red Bull, who is in the MLS Cup. You have games against Philadelphia, Nashville, Atlanta in that first, month and a half of the season. You're going to want to figure out some of the unknowns if you're Pat Noonan and Chris Albright as to how does this roster play to its maximum capability. And that to me is why I might push back on that argument of just being like, this happens. Yeah, it happens. It happens to every team, every sport, but it also doesn't necessarily mean that there is a loss there when it happens to another team.
Yeah. I think if I could jump in here, I think that you both make good points. I think the fact that who it is matters because our play style went through that one individual that we expected wouldn't be there. So what's the play style going to be? And the other two that you might count on, one is there now, and then another one, at least for now, that we know of is still holding out, that have been playmakers at times. Who do you go to? Jeremy, can you solve this debate for us? Where would you take it?
Well, as always, yes, I can solve this debate. The Kubo thing is, it's almost as if we've kind of taken Kubo for granted a bit, because I think maybe Kubo or his representatives are saying, listen, this is great and all, and this is a good setup, but you could go to X number of other MLS teams and be a starter every day for them. And I think if you're Kubo and you're kind of in the last stretch of your career, you got to be sitting there going, I'd like to actually be playing. I'd like to actually be getting meaningful minutes. And we don't know that that's going to happen in Cincinnati. It hasn't happened really for the most part for his time here. Outside of that, kind of truncated 2020 season. So I can definitely see why Kubo and maybe his representatives are finally trying to play hardball a little bit. I don't fault him for it. But all of this disrupts the beginning of the season. And this is something that keeps happening to this club, where we go into the season or we go into the preseason with something very unresolved and a question still looming. We had this season, 2 seasons ago, we ended up winning the Supporters Shield, but we spent the first bit of that season with the whole Brenner holdout, wanting to go to Nottingham Forest. That doesn't happen. Then he kind of he's there, he's not there. His finally gets that move. So just kind of that very unresolved thing happening in one of your key positions. With the Acosta thing, it's so paramount that this team, if they have to move on from him, can do this immediately and change to whatever style, whatever plan they're going to go with. They have to go with it now. I'm honestly disappointed that the Acosta situation isn't even isn't 100% resolved already. Like, I feel like if this was something that was pushed by him back at the end of the season, back in the fall, and here we are, we've just hopped on the plane to Florida, and we're no closer to that switchover happening. That's going to create a problem that's going to slow things down, and it's going to mean the preseason's not going to be what Pat wants it to be. And I think Pat's point was very clear. Like, you and your representatives can have your discussions with Chris in the front office, but I'm in charge of what's on field, and I need you to show up to that until you are no longer a part of this. So I totally understand Pat's frustration, and I love the fact that Pat's also a guy that's just not going to guard his words. Mm-hmm. He's not going to pull punches. On the Luca thing, I do want to point out one thing, because it's like, hey, was it confusion? Was it? So there's been a little bit of internet investigating going on. Before all of this happened, on Luca's Instagram, his bio said, soccer ball icon at FC Cincinnati. Then when the rumors came out, it was the soccer ball icon, and then it just said athlete next to it. And now it's just the soccer ball icon if you go on his bio. That's all he is. So apparently he is very still confused of what he is. Is he an athlete? Is he a soccer ball? Does he play for FC Cincinnati? So unresolved.
Oh, man. Nick, I think you're muted there if you were saying something. You mentioned Kubo being our offense for a while, or maybe Jason mentioned Kubo being our offense for a while this season, and banging in a few goals here and there, having a bit of a career season. And then you look at Orellano. Like, I could say Kubo's our offense inside the 18, and Orellano's our offense maybe from 60 yards and beyond. Right? Is that fair to say?
Orellano hit a few. Orellano kept it within like the 20 to 30 yards too.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. He did hit some of those, but he's our only guy scoring from beyond 60 yards this season. I'll tell you that.
He's the long range artillery.
Yeah.
All right. So, well, thanks guys for jumping in on that little exciting argument there. I do think it's a big deal. I think most of us are on the same page. It is a big deal that some of these guys aren't there. To what extent it's a big deal, I don't know. You can make that argument, and we just did. So I'll leave it there. So what do we learn about the first week, after the first week of training camp in Cincinnati. They left just before temperatures dropped to head to Clearwater, which I understand is still going to be pretty chilly down there. We learned Assad will not be returning, at least for now, is what Noonan said. From what we know, Assad will not be returning. Miazga and Haglund are still not full go with the team. Noonan said, if you listen to last week's show, we listened to a clip where Noonan believes Miazga will be here in the next couple of weeks. He'll be full go middle of preseason, and that Haglund would be a little bit longer than that. So
I have a small report on Haglund. I
did
see him on Boxing Day at Target, and he was moving good. It's
okay.
Really just good movement. His gait seemed normal. So
was he carrying anything?
He was carrying his daughter. Yes.
Okay.
There we go.
Did you grab a ball and try and get past him?
I didn't. I didn't try to meg him at the Starbucks line at the time.
Okay. All right. So the lateral movement we're still uncertain of there with that.
Yeah. We're still unclear on the side to side. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we hope to see both Matt and Nick Haglund coming on soon. Newly with the team, we have Kevin Denkey that we've seen some video on social media the team has posted. He's looking pretty decent, and Pat Noonan seems impressed with his presence in front of the goal. He says he has a natural talent for finding the goal and consistently hits it on frame, which is not something we've seen consistently from our strikers in quite some time. So I'm excited about that. Brian Anunga is newly in camp working out with the team. But again, the big question is who will be running that midfield with Kubo gone, with Lucho gone. We talked a little bit about that. We got a game coming up this Friday against CF Montreal. Tactically, what did we learn from this first week? Is there anything Pat Noonan could have learned in this first week of preseason?
I don't really know if he could have learned anything other than what he told us, just to see how guys are moving. I mean, this is their first real workouts. And because of the weather and stuff here, I doubt they really had a chance to do much, in terms of training. But I am hopeful, and I am optimistic because of his comments about Kevin Denkey, as you mentioned, Brian. Having somebody like that, we haven't had a striker like that here since Brenner. And unlike Brenner, it seems like Denkey really wants to be here. Having worked in, I want to put this out there, having worked with athletes and coaches in a professional sense and working professionally in public relations, teaching people how to deal with the media and how to kind of put out a good image. Whoever has been coaching Kevin Denkey, or he's just a natural at this stuff. That dude he seems to really be enjoying his time here. He's sharing people's social media stuff, replying to people on Twitter and on Instagram, fans and stuff. I mean, I am stoked to see what he can do this Friday against Montreal.
That's a great way to win the hearts of your new fans when they're angry at some of their previous favorites, correct?
Yeah, good timing on that. I agree with Jason 100%. It's Kevin Denkey is going to be so important to this team this year. And I think every time at this point, we just all get PTSD whenever somebody says DP striker FCC. It's because it's just been chaos after chaos. But everything we've heard about Denkey so far, from his former teammates in Belgium to some of his fans back in Belgium and some of his, former coaches, it's all been positive. And I think that's big for FCC to have somebody who's going to come in here and do the work. I think we're, all in agreement that this is probably a 2-3 year stop for him. He's going to come in here, best case scenario, put up some big numbers, and then poof, he's off to Premier League or Germany or wherever. But you want a guy that if he's going to be here, that he's going to do the work, that he's going to actively try to make himself better and not just, watch the calendar until the days tick down off of a contract until, somebody else, Nottingham Forest, comes in and gives him a big offer. So I'm encouraged by what I've seen from all the off the field stuff for Denkey. Now we just need somebody to get him the ball up top, and we'll be good.
I think you're right. You're right on the PTSD thing. Like, I feel like everyone's like, "Oh, what do you think about Denkey?" Like, they say he's this, they say he's that. I'm like, this is the third guy that they say that all these great things about. So we'll see if this one works out, because the other two had a lot of glowing things about him as well. And then, I mean, Brenner was actually good. He just didn't want to actually stay.
Right.
Yeah.
And Bupenza was, he's already burning some bridges at his new club, I see.
Yeah. What does the scouting report say about Denkey's preference for pizza places at 2 a.m?
Just keep him off of 4th Street. That's just the whole.
Nick, you make a good transition to where I want to go, because Denkey definitely needs someone to get him the ball, deliver him the ball. He's not a guy that's going to do it himself. He has skill. He's got ability. Noonan mentioned that. He's got the ability to get around defenders and find the frame. But he thrives with someone dishing him the ball. So as we move into this next segment, we want to invite Coach onto the show here, get a fifth voice here on CST. Coach, welcome.
Hey, guys. Happy to be here. Good conversation so far.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just going to get better with your voice here joining us as we talk about some folks that are in camp right now as trialists. We've been talking about Denkey. We need some people to get him the ball. So we've got some trialists in camp. Tell us what you know about the folks that are in camp that may be the guys that we're going to be counting on to deliver Denkey the ball.
Yeah, so I guess what we know so far, which is not a ton because we don't get a lot of actual, game footage or anything, and Pat Noonan really hasn't spoken to these guys. But there are 3 guys that I want to talk about. First one is not actually a trialist. It's an FCC 2 player, Brian Schaefer, who Pat Noonan actually did talk about, saying that he has been one of the standout guys, a guy who probably was not even expected to be performing with the first team right now, but for those absences you all were talking about, Haglund, Miazga, guys that aren't quite ready to step into the training pitch yet. He's been stepping up, and Pat Noonan specifically mentioned him as a guy that has impressed. In terms of trialists, there are 2 that have been reported. There's Nico Hämäläinen, who is a 27-year-old American-born Finnish international. You can tell by that last name. FC Dallas Academy, moved to QPR a while ago, and then was loaned out all over the place for seasons and seasons, which included a stop at LAFC, and then most recently in MLS was 2021. He had 14 appearances with the LA Galaxy. Then he spent last season, or actually the 2023 season, with HJK in Finland. And then he wasn't on a team in 2024. He was just a free agent, and I couldn't find out any information why. He's known more as a center back, although he has some left back on his resume as well. And you wonder, with our short roster on the left side of the pitch, let's say, especially with Alvaro Barreal officially not being part of the team anymore, as officially as you can get that, I guess, if he is being looked at in that left wing back position. And then the other guy is Abdi Salim, 23-year-old Syracuse graduate, drafted by Orlando City and spent some time with the Orlando City B team, made 3 senior appearances for Orlando City before being loaned to Detroit City last season. But then concerning with Salim is that he only made 2 appearances for that Detroit City team. He just could not get on the field. And he is also a center back. He has played internationally for Somalia, so kind of interesting. But I would say when you look at those 3 guys, the fact that Brian Schaefer as a center back was called out by Noonan, and then Nico and Abdi, both also central type defenders, just were kind of ignored. It could be because they're trialists and not part of the setup already, or it could be just that they're not going to really help this team out at this point.
Yeah, we've talked at length, maybe last week a little bit, about the expectation that we had, that we thought maybe the U22 would be brought in as a center back. I see none of these guys would be part of that U22 initiative. Do you still expect that we'll go after someone in that younger age bracket as a U22 initiative than somebody that's 27 like this Nico, or 23 like Abdi Salim?
Yeah, I'd be interested in everybody else's thoughts on this too. From my standpoint, it makes sense from a roster building standpoint because those U22 spots are places where you can spend some money. So you're not just getting a guy who spent 2024 without a team or, couldn't get on the field for Detroit City. You can go out and get a high talent player like, I don't know, somebody, I'll just throwing this out here, Yerson Mosquera type of player, right? We saw him be really good for the club at times. The interesting thing about a central defender, though, is those guys are your guys that need to be, the most game savvy, the highest soccer IQ. So the U22 spots, I feel like, are really better for attackers, guys that you can just throw out there at the end of the game and just be like, just go after it. Whereas these central defenders, you kind of want to have more there for them, more veteran presence. But at the same time, when you have a locker room so far with your center backs after the offseason moves that include Matt Miazga, Miles Robinson, Nick Hagland, and then like Alvis Powell and maybe DeAndre Yedlin as center back fill-in, that's a lot of veterans. So throw a U22 guy in there. Sure, he'll be a boy amongst men.
I mean, apparently the club did try to sign Malcolm Zhang, the Swedish youth international center back. He ends up actually just signing with a club in France. But apparently that was the plan at one point this winter, was to go after that U22 center back.
Yeah. And if you're looking at the way the roster is built right now, though, it seems like the center back position is the deepest position on the roster, especially once we get Miazga and Hagland back, because you'll have Robinson, you'll have Miazga, you got Teenage still on the team. So for me, if you have the money to spend on a U22, I'd be looking at somewhere like the midfield or maybe that left wing back that we seem to need, something like that instead of the center back position.
I'm getting flashbacks, Jason, of last season talking about our center backs being our deepest position, and we were best in MLS at goals given up and defending in front of the goal. And then we saw what happened when one went down, and a few weeks later another went down, and we thinned out. So I was a believer that we had plenty of depth at that central defensive position until we didn't. So bringing in another guy or two would be fantastic. One of these veteran players, as you said, Coach, and maybe a U22 that's going to give us maybe some longer term consistency there that can learn from guys like Matt Miazga, guys like Nick Hagland, that has been the heart and soul of this team. He's a good veteran leader. To have him in the locker room with a younger player, I think would be fantastic. Nick, any thoughts on this center back depth position here?
No, I think it is something that I think FCC wants to invest in moving forward because, I think the Miles Robinson future, I think, is kind of in flux at this point just because you don't really know how much longer you have with him. We know he tried to go to Europe a year ago before he came here. And, I loved watching Teenage last year, in the couple of games he played. I think he really played very strong, and I think he's going to be a good depth piece. My question to you, Coach, is that, in that 3 center back system, there's always one guy who seems to be kind of like the ball, carrier, the guy that pushes the play forward, a guy that's, we saw, Chiadoze do it a little bit last year. Do you think that FCC needs to prioritize maybe a center back with a little bit more of a skill to get forward, not just on set pieces, but somebody who can kind of transition the ball out of the backfield, sort of into that central midfield?
Yeah, so interestingly, it's a really good question because I think they lost their best center back passer, both the top two, because I think that Ian Murphy was low-key pretty good passer out of center back, especially with those line splitting passes. And then you mentioned Chidozie with those more like raking long balls. Now, we definitely know Matt Miazga can do a job there, right? But typically when you play 3 center backs, the guys that are going to have the more time on the ball to look up and hit passes, longer passes, are going to be the outside center backs. That central center back, which Miazga plays, is usually just shuttling the ball from side to side. So it would not be a bad idea to have a guy in here there can do that. But the thing that you have to remember is there is a lot of salary and a lot of defensive skill and things built up in those starting 3. And you're not going to bring in a guy as a passer to carry the ball forward that's going to start over Miles or over Teenage, probably. Now, as a guy who could be a spot starter and a fill-in, if you prioritize that ability to carry the ball forward or push the ball forward, then maybe it becomes interesting. Maybe it's like if you're trying to lock down a game, you can put in a guy like Nick Hagland at center back late in the game. And if you're trying to go for it, maybe you do make a swap and have a guy that's a little more offensively talented, although you typically do that with other positions on the pitch and leave your center backs be. So who knows? It's an interesting problem for Pat Noonan because he has not actually proven to date that he can make those kinds of changes, right? It go to only 2 center backs on the field chasing a game or really change things up tactically other than just like throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and hoping something sticks.
It seems like more than ever, Pat Noonan has a lot of questions to answer with his personnel on the field, who's going to be there, when they're showing up to camp, who they're going to play through, who's going to be taking set pieces this year to deliver the ball potentially to those tall center backs in front of the net. Lots of questions about personnel. Coach, I want to get your perspective on maybe personnel, but maybe aside from personnel, that I think personnel plays into it. But what are you hoping that Pat Noonan goes after? What do you want him to focus on in this preseason, knowing that some of these guys may or may not be there in the next week or two?
Yeah, I mean, I think because the personnel is changing and you're not sure if Lucho or Kubo are going to show up and be part of this team or if something else is going to happen, if a guy is going to be brought in to replace them, I think what you're really trying to do is, first of all, in every preseason, the biggest thing is getting guys' fitness levels up, right? That's always going to be part of it, trying to keep health, but getting fitness up. Then you're starting to develop bigger team ideas, tactics, and phases of play. This is how we want to attack, not who we want to attack with, but how. So, when the ball shifts into this wide area, we want a central midfielder to check here. We want a forward to stretch here. Those sorts of things that are going to be present regardless of who is on the pitch. Yes, it's going to look different if it's Sergio Santos stretching that back line as opposed to Kevin Denkey, right? Or as opposed to Corey Baird. But it's a general principle of play. Those are the kinds of things you're really looking along with fitness to develop when you talk about worrying about the personnel, who is going to be and who is not going to be there. Now, the thing that you can't do, which I think is also important for preseason, and maybe you can do it a little bit, is developing chemistry in the group, right? How do you develop chemistry between an attacking unit when 2 of your 3 starters might not be there, although Kubo probably won't be a starter in this team, which might be, you guys reference why he's holding out. But, when you have guys missing like that, you can't develop those partnerships. You can't develop 11 aside partnerships anyway, because you probably don't know your lineup, but you can look for the little guys that are playing next to each other. Is your left wing back and your left center back starting to strike up rapport? Oh, wait, we don't have a left wing back either. So those are the things I think Pat Noonan is probably losing his hair over.
You talk about, the starting 11. So 2 things you said there that kind of struck my attention, and Jason or Jeremy, feel free to jump in on this too. Not knowing your starting 11, we mentioned it last week. We had a different starting 11 every game of the season until the last couple of weeks. So we were still playing with that chemistry, throughout the season. We had, some hiccups and some injuries in the midst of that caused some of that. But to not know your starting 11 going into the first match of the season doesn't seem like it's going to be too big of an issue for Pat Noonan. The bigger issue, you mentioned it, is knowing how you want to play, not who is going to be playing that way. I struggle with that concept a little bit. Like, I get it and I understand that. But if we think back a few years, we had a style of play that we were playing a Dutch system. That's how we were going to be. We're going to be FC Cincinnati. We're playing this way. And it felt like we were just cramming guys in that didn't naturally play that way, that didn't have chemistry. And we tried to force it, and it didn't work until we changed up our formation with some of the same personnel, not everyone, but some of the same personnel, changed the formation, and things started to click. So I do think there's a balance there between who and how we play. What would you say to that?
I mean, I think there's definitely a balance, but I think that FC Cincinnati, what we've seen has, I'm not sure, ever hit that balance. You referenced the Dutch period, right? Where you're trying to play a high possession style, like really intricate, almost tiki-taka style play with a bunch of guys out there that have terrible first touches and can't really do that. So that's like the whole round peg, square hole, right? And then you have on this other side a player with Lucho Acosta where you can't build a system because Lucho Acosta is the system. Get the ball to him and let him cook. And certainly you can try to design ways to get the ball to him in advantageous spots, which is what Pat Noonan did to go from, barely making the playoffs to being Supporter Shield winners. It was about getting Lucho on the ball in those dangerous areas. But you can't do that same thing. Getting Dotto on the ball in those dangerous areas or Buka or any of the other midfielders, Kubo, is not going to be the same. It's not going to be even close to the same. So what you had is a system that you developed where the players could not fit into the system. And then you have a player that becomes the system. And I think this year, depending on the Lucho system, situation, we could finally see FC Cincinnati or Pat Noonan actually be able to say, guys, this is the way I want to play. This is the way I think we're set up to play. So maybe he really always wanted to play 4-4-2 diamond like they did back in Philly. Maybe he says, well, we don't have the guys to do that. But within who we do have, this is how our system is going to play. And that's what I mean by developing that style. Now, Lucho Acosta, I already referenced, that's the problem with him being, is he here, is he not, is everything changes with that guy on the pitch because he is a singularity. He is not just another guy, even like a superstar, just another guy. Like, when we see a lot of other teams, superstars, you can play sort of the same with Ricky Puig on the field or with Gaston Brueggemann, because can he do it as well as Ricky Puig? No, not even close, but they're going to be the same type of player. So it's interesting having a guy like Lucho.
Yeah, I just kind of want to agree with Coach right there too, that, this is a rare opportunity for FC Cincinnati to really see what they've got, because you don't have to make sure that Lucho gets X number of touches per possession. Like that's what I'm kind of excited about, is to see, does Dotto come in and turn himself into a serviceable number 10? Do we get a number 10 from another team that is serviceable? Because and we'll talk about that later, but there's a lot of MLS teams who are very good, who have even won CONCACAF Champions Cup, that don't have a player with the same skill set as Lucho Acosta. And it's going to be really interesting to see what Noonan can cook up as they head down to camp, and to see what lineup he rolls out on Friday.
Yeah. Jeremy, is this a blessing in disguise that Lucho's not in camp and they've got some ability and some flexibility to play with their system and some of their guys getting more touches on the ball?
I mean, if it helps kind of start the finality of Lucho not being there in a post-Lucho existence for FC Cincinnati, yes, because as Coach put it, it's like you can then build a system that actually fits what you have, not just around one person. But it ultimately means we're hopefully bringing somebody else in to that equation, and that person's obviously not here. So until that's settled and you get, not only that system you want, but then, you talked about that chemistry. You have Kevin Denkey up top that is going to be able to produce for us, but he's got to be able to be on the same page with the guys around him and get that service. And that takes a little bit of time. So every day that question is still looming over us as far as Lucho and what becomes of it and who comes in after it. As long as that's still there, there's still kind of this incomplete thing we're working with.
Yeah. Well, Coach, we brought you in for this segment, but would love to have you stick around if you've got the time and you're willing to stick in here for a couple more bits of our conversation.
Let's do it.
All right. Hey, before we get too far, I want to let you know about Beyond Exercise. It's a local physical therapy and fitness business that helps people stay active and injury-free. And in fact, they've helped some of our local MLS, MLS Next, and FCC Academy players with their health and performance needs. Check out their suite of services at gobeyondexercise.com. Another one of our show sponsors. We're grateful for you and all that you give to allow us to do what we do here at Cincinnati Soccer Talk. Thank you, Beyond Exercise. Now, there's some movement in MLS. I do, before we get too deep into that, you mentioned, I think, Nick, earlier about our friend Alvaro Barreal. It looks like there's a deal that's being confirmed as we speak with Santos FC in the Brazilian League. So for those holding out and hoping that Alvaro would be here this season, I don't think that's happening. We'll wait for absolute confirmation from the team, but it looks like that's what's going down there. We've had some other movement around the league. Our Kevin Kelsey that we had on with FC Cincinnati last year is now with Portland. Josef Martinez is in San Jose now. John Tolkien. Anybody sad that John Tolkien's not going to be around for that first match against the Red Bulls?
It's funny with the Red Bulls. Tolkien's gone. Amaya's gone. Aaron Long, he's not there anymore. Like all the people we love to hate at that club are not there anymore. It kind of hurts. It hurts to not have that waiting for us on the calendar of 90 minutes of booing and jeering specific people. And so I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that the New York Red Bulls era of truly hating them and having some very targeted hate is kind of gone. It's the end of an era.
Give it time. Someone will step up to the occasion.
I know Justin Blair would join me in saying I love to hate Sean Nealis and Lewis Morgan. Love to hate that guy. Really love to hate that little twerp Edelman, who every time somebody breathes on him, he's not just fouled, he is hurt, guys. Like he has been. That guy deserves a yellow card because somebody was near him. I love to hate a lot of those guys still.
Yeah, I'm okay hating on New York, hating on the Red Bulls. The individual players, yeah, I don't know. I'm still going to find someone to hate on that New York Red Bull team. It may not be, it's obviously not going to be John Tolkien and his itty-bitty shin guards that flop all over his shoes, but it's going to be someone else, and we'll make it work. So in some big news, we got Jesus Ferreira leaving Dallas and going to Seattle Sounders for Leo Chu. And the big news that was starting to potentially leak rumors, we're not sure, it's on his radar, is Evander said that FC Cincinnati would be a team that he might be interested in going to.
I mean, I feel like right now he wants to go anywhere that isn't Portland. So yeah, he is open to all options for that.
Let's entertain that for a moment, though, because we've got this whole conversation that we've gone on with Lucho not being at camp. We're assuming he's not going to be there this season. There's going to be a deal that's going to get done soon here, hopefully, that if he's not going to be here, that gets done so we can move on. Is Evander an MVP level number 10 that plays for Portland? Is he a guy that fits into, you talked about the who and the how of the system, right? Just a moment ago. Is he a guy that fits into the system that FC Cincinnati could really thrive with him running and controlling that midfield?
You said MVP level number 10, right?
I did.
Well, it seems like we need one of those. So yeah, I mean, here's the thing. And this maybe comes up to something that Coach can hit on with formations earlier. Evander's very different from Lucho Acosta. Evander's somebody that plays maybe a little bit wider than Lucho used to play. Lucho used to play kind of from the middle, maybe flanking a little bit outwards. Evander seems to like to go from the out in. It's different than how he would play, but the end, he's a really good passer, extremely strong passer. And it's interesting because I hear a lot of people say, he's not good at the press. He doesn't have, a lot of effort coming back onto the ball. I don't know if I agree with that take or not, because I've seen some of the clips where he is pretty strong in the press. I don't know if that's just a highlight reel of him, sort of pressing, but he seems to be a good player. And maybe the question I'll pose to you guys is, could you see him maybe, as a player, could you see them maybe finding a way to fit him in? Because he does bring a lot of the skill sets that you would want from a number 10.
Well, I'm going to jump in here first because I saw your faces, and before you guys fight with Nick over what he just said,
all right.
I want to just say that, right, you said he's not Lucho. He's a very different player. Any number 10, anybody that we bring in, right, is going to be very different from Lucho. So does he bring the skill set? Now, I'm going to turn it over to whoever wants to take the first shot.
He's bad vibes.
Pick me. Jeremy.
Right.
Jeremy.
Line up.
The vibe, you guys can talk X's and O's and tactics, and he plays this way. It just seems to me that he's possibly a bad vibes guy, and we could stand to go a season without a bad vibes guy on. We talk about hanging out on 4th Street. We don't want that again. No, no bad vibes. I'm out for the vibes.
Can we get examples of the vibes though? Because sometimes the vibes is where you are, and a change of scenery can completely change your outlook.
Yeah.
I don't know how a guy who vocally wants to leave a club that's paying him handsomely and a Kevin Denkey guy who's all smiles and just glad to be there. I don't see how those two vibes mesh, and we need those to mesh.
Yeah, and I want to jump in and talk tactically just a bit because I think that Jeremy is dead on with the vibes because Evander, just this whole saga with Portland, right? Just if I was a Portland fan, it would leave me feeling a little bit like, oh, I don't know, an FC Cincinnati fan with Lucho Acosta right now, something that I would like to avoid. But I totally get Jason's point. Portland is kind of a dumpster fire of an organization when you talk about especially the women's side of the game too, right? So who knows? Maybe it is just Portland. Maybe it's just too many rainy days up there in the Pacific Northwest. Tactically, I think another MVP level number 10 from a couple years ago, Sebastian Driussi. And that is who Evander reminds me of in terms of not his playing style, but his performance. I think his numbers are inflated. When you look at his assist numbers, he finished second in the league to Lucho Acosta. And you think, oh, if you can't have number one, number two is the best, right? Key passes, he was up there, tops of the league. However, when you start looking into the nitty gritty of that, like the number of times he passes the ball into the penalty area, he's way, way low on that list. The reason why Evander had so many assists is because if you remember that Portland team, if you go look at their team stats, they were a team that didn't defend. They just threw everybody forward and tried to score a bunch of goals. Like they constantly got criticized for basically having two Luca Orellano style defenders playing on the left and right. Not the same player, not as good, but both guys that are like, we're not going to really defend ever. We're just here to go forward. And their center back talent was not very good, so they just tried to score. So Evander would just kind of parole out there, and he would hit a few beautiful passes, but nothing like we see Lucho. He's not dissecting the defense. His assists are coming from hitting maybe a long ball into the channel that then a guy hits a 18 or 20-yard shot that happens to go in. So is that replicable all the time, everywhere, or are those numbers inflated? I think Evander's a very good player, very, very good player. I just am thinking, if you're trying to build a team the way you want, the way you as Pat Noonan or as me as a fan want, a guy like Evander that is not going to press, I don't care what we say, he does not defend, Nick. So, there might be some highlights out there. You could probably find some highlights of Fernando Adi pressing and winning the ball back once or twice. I mean, the dude just kind of floats around offensively. He's more of a second striker than a 10. And say what you want about Lucho, he loved to lead the press. And he did that in fits and starts, but he did it really well. So I would want a guy that could press better, especially with a guy in Denkey who we know thrives in that kind of environment. I would want a guy who is good at passing the ball to our forwards in the box, whether that's getting deep and into those Man City back zones and putting it in, whether it's feeding little through balls. That's where we saw Brenner and Vasquez have all their goals that year, was Lucho playing those little darting balls into the box. It's not, hey, I'm going to give you the ball 25 yards from goal, and if you hit a banger, I get an assist for it.
Vibes aside, and I mean, y'all make good points. I will say, like, back to my original point, maybe it is a system that he is stuck in that makes things seem negative. And maybe, I mean, to the point about Portland's defense, I would put FC Cincinnati's defense up against anybody else in the league. And he's not going to have, I think, the same sort of problem when you have, two really good defensive mids in Buka and Obi behind him. You've got a really solid, hopefully, back line, left wing back notwithstanding. And you've got, a much better striking core coming in and a much better skill player in Luca Orellano. So I think maybe it could be adapted. I mean, if you do look at the X's and O's and you do look at the numbers, 15 goals and 19 assists last year and a pass percentage of 82% the entire time he's been in the league. That's hard to come by in Major League Soccer. That being said, and I've already been on record as saying, like, you don't need someone who is an all-star 10 to win MLS Cup in this league. So if he comes, great. If he doesn't, I'm not going to be upset about it. But at least for me, I'd be willing to take a flyer on him, especially this early in the year when you could have that opportunity to get him acclimated to everybody, get him out of a situation he doesn't want to be in. And who knows, maybe playing with a good vibes guy like Kevin Denkey might, pep him up a little bit to know that, hey, I'm surrounded by people who seem to really enjoy playing with each other, to play in a system that doesn't so much rely on pressing the ball forward and not even playing that much defense. I think there's an option if they wanted to take a flyer on Evander.
Is it truly an option? I don't know, right? We don't know how, how legit these rumors are.
Is it a flyer? Is spending $15 million on a DP, taking a flyer on a guy? That's more my worry. I think he could be a fantastic player. Yeah. He could be an all-star. I just also see the downside there, and spending $15 million on a guy and bringing him in as a DP and when I feel like the fit is not as smooth as I'd want it to be, that's where I would give myself pause. Now, I'll be excited if they sign him because he is a very good player, and I'll see how Pat Noonan can use him. I just don't want them to sign him. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a lot of money to spend on a guy that, we've already spent 16 on Denkey in front of him. So who's going to want the ball more? I do think you talk about vibes. Denkey definitely wants the ball, but he wants to prove himself. He said, they put trust in me. I've got to deliver. So you need a guy that's going to trust him to deliver, that's going to dish the ball to him in those spaces that, again, last year we saw Lucho keep the ball more times than maybe he should have because he didn't trust the people in front of him. We need a player that's going to trust the guy in front of him to finish the ball. And do we need $15 million to do that? I don't know.
I think to your point too, a lot of the debate over, the number 10 comes down to how you want Denkey to play. Is he going to want a traditional number 10 like Lucho was, kind of feeding him from the back? Is he going to want almost like a center forward playing off of him a little bit? What maybe worked in Belgium maybe doesn't work in the MLS. So you're going to have to kind of figure out what's the best way to get him the ball in the spaces where he can be dangerous. And, maybe Evander, his skill set's not that guy. Maybe it's more of a Dado Valenzuela who can kind of be, sort of the quasi second striker, quasi attacking mid, just kind of playing off of him and creating space for Denkey to finish. If, figuring out that is going to probably figure out how FCC is going to tackle this number 10, if they're going to need a real true like DP level playmaker, or if this is something that they can open up with, maybe some quality MLS guys or some people they have on the roster that can take up and step up.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. I think that one of the things that I saw last year, and then we'll move on from this conversation. We've got a few more things to hit, but one of the things I saw last year was forwards, strikers, outside mids not making runs any longer because they knew they probably weren't getting the ball. We haven't seen a guy like Brandon Vasquez in a while that will make the run. He will find the space. He was smart moving into open space off the ball, and Lucho could find him. Lucho, for a while, didn't trust him, but did eventually, right, as he started putting balls in the back of the net. So Denkey, I hope, again, back to your point, Jeremy, we've heard a lot of good things about a lot of good players that get here that don't really pan out in that number 9 position, but is a smart player that makes the runs. And if we've got a guy that, again, is serviceable, maybe is on the roster, maybe is not, that can find that final line breaking pass to a guy that's going to make that run because he's hungry for the goal. Maybe we have them on the team, maybe we don't right now. So, hey guys, this is episode 398. I mentioned at the top of the show, 2 more episodes, we hit episode 400, and that's going to be a live show at Norden or at Grainworks. So we invite you to join us at Grainworks Brewing Company in Westchester on Saturday, February 1st for their 4th annual Scarf Release Party. This family-friendly event will feature appearances by Gary the Lion, a former FC Cincinnati player, the FCC Street team, live music from Bofus, a silent auction, raffle, and more. Food for Mama Bear's Mac and root beer will be on tap. And the event starts at 4 p.m. and there will be a CST Live Show, episode 400 of Cincinnati Soccer Talk, live from Grainworks at the Norden Scarf Release Party, beginning at 5:30. It's one of our favorite events of the year, so make sure to be there and join us on February 1st. Now, guys, I plan to be there, and this will be my first live show of CST at the Norden Scarf Release Party. Jeremy, Jason, you guys have been a part of this for a number of years now. Tell us what people can expect if they want to come out and show up and be part of this.
Yeah, it's an awesome time. It's kind of the unofficial kickoff of this season. You finally get to kind of get back with some of the people that you would normally hang out with before the match, or
he's so excited he froze.
Yeah.
Yeah, echo what Jeremy said though. Yeah, it's a great time. This is the first one that I've not been able to attend. Because of other commitments, but yeah, there's a silent auction. The Norden folks are great. All the supporters groups are great, but the Norden folks really put on a good time up there at Grainworks. The beer is good. Silent auction is great. I have won something in the silent auction every year that I've done it. I got a tattoo one year, and then I got like a gift card or something. Jeremy's
I won this. I won this last year. This is a signed ball from Jurgen Mascara. I won this, and this Satan's here. My Yersa Mascara signed ball. So you can win cool stuff like that. There's also like massive prizes too, like some really expensive stuff. Yeah, it's a fun time. The show is good. We try to do a little crowd work. It's not just you just watching four guys just mouth breathe into microphones. It's a little more interactive and fun. So yeah, it's definitely an awesome time to kind of have that unofficial kickoff of the 2025 season.
Yeah, well, we're looking forward to it. Hope to see you all there. Join us at Grainworks on February 1st, starting at 4, live show at 5:30. Looking forward to seeing you. Hey, we would love for y'all to get in touch with us. If you've got feedback about the show, questions about the team, things that you'd like us to talk about here on the show, send us an email to feedback@Cincinnati Soccer Talk, or tweet us at Cincy Soccer Talk. We'd love to hear from you and work in some of your questions here on the show and others that we have going on. Guys, let's get to our final thoughts. Before we get there, I do want to mention we did have a U.S. men's national team. Miles Robinson played. We don't have time to really get into that. Maybe next week we'll talk about some
Captain Miles Robinson.
Yeah. Captain Miles Robinson. That's right. Captain,
possibly future captain. You know, we're going to be in the market for a new captain, it sounds like. So
yeah, that's right. He's captaining a pretty young squad, which maybe we'll talk about again later on this month or next month as they continue. So final thoughts, guys. I wanted to change this up a little bit. I think instead of, sometimes our final thoughts are just pretty random, and that's okay. But I thought I'd just pose a question because we're in FC Cincinnati MLS preseason here. So if you're Pat Noonan, right? Put yourself in his shoes. You're Pat Noonan. What's one specific thing that you are looking for during this next month of preseason? Nick, I'm going to start with you.
I think the big question for me is, how do you most effectively use Luca Orellano? At this point, with no Lucho Acosta, he's, like we mentioned at the top of the show, he's going to probably be your number one playmaker for a while. I think a big key is to try to figure out how you make the most out of his playmaking skills. How do you utilize him the most in space? How do you utilize him most with the ball, off the ball? Is that a left wing back? Do you want to move him inside as a true number 10? Is he going to be like that second striker kind of guy that we talked about playing off of Denkey? Is he somebody that, you use as sort of a left attacking mid, right attacking mid situation? There's a lot of questions out there, and I think that is going to be the key. If you're Pat Noonan, is how do I put this person in a position to get the most out of him? Because they're going to need everything they can get out of Luca Orellano to get through this transitional period.
Yeah, that's a good take. I think Noonan's probably watching for some of that this year. Jason, how about you?
I have a similar take to Nick, but I'm excited to see how they plan on getting the ball into scoring position, specifically to take advantage of what Kevin Denkey brings to this club. If you've watched his highlights, the dude can score with both feet. He seems maybe a little weak with headers, but whatever. I didn't see a lot of highlights of those. But this is your DP striker. It, at the time, was an MLS record signing. You've got to get him the ball, and I'm excited to see what Pat and the boys can cook up to get the ball to him without a Lucho there. Does it go through Luca? Does it go through Obi? I don't know. I'm just really excited to see, what sort of changes they're making to the style of play now that we kind of have to move on from Lucho. So really excited about this preseason.
I'll say if it goes through Obi, I'll be quite impressed.
Man can pass. He can pass.
Jeremy.
If I'm Pat, I'm really excited and eager to see whoever these deals that are close actually are, and see them actually on the field and under my purview as head coach, so we can actually figure out what we're going to be doing this year.
Yeah, no doubt. That would be, knowing your personnel going in would be fantastic.
Yeah, what a weird concept.
Coach.
I don't know how to follow this. So it's like, how can we use our presumptive best player? How can we score goals? And who are our players going to be? I mean, that's everything, right? For me, in all seriousness, I thought last season, outside of the things you can't control, injuries, things like that, I think the biggest weakness on this team was the wingback play. I think left wingback play was spotty at times. Assad was really good, but then had some big defensive lapses. On the right-hand side, you generally had pretty good offense, but it was where a pretty good defense, but it's where the offense would go to die. You saw DeAndre Yedlin getting into scoring positions, or those Man City cutback zones where you could chop that ball across the 6-yard box for tap-ins time and time again, and smashing the ball into the side netting or whatever it is DeAndre Yedlin does over there. Alvis Powell still hasn't scored a goal, and we all know that's just a matter of time. It's gonna come, right? I mean, it's gonna. So if I am Pat Noonan, I want to know, do I actually have the wing backs on this team to play this system with 3 center backs that we've been doing? That means the wing backs are the only wide players on the pitch. Or do I need to do a 3-4-3 if I'm set on 3 center backs, or switch to a 4-back to get some outside mids or wingers on the field so that we have some sort of chance creation from out wide?
Yeah. No, also a good take. I will say there was talk last season about expanding the frame of the goal on an international level. And so maybe that's the way Alvis Powell will get that first goal. We'll see. Maybe it is just a matter of time there. I'll wrap up with
taller too.
Yeah, can he expand it upward?
Yeah. Alvis Powell getting a goal is like when Bartolo Colon finally hit his only career home run. It's going to happen sometime. And when it does, it's going to be glorious.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you for that. My final take, I just wonder, you mentioned him earlier in the show, is Dado Valenzuela. Is he a guy that if I'm Pat Noonan, I'm watching him this preseason and just asking the question, can he step up? Can he be a more consistent number 10, a more consistent quasi striker, number 10? We saw him get some decent minutes at times last year and then come in the last 5 or 10 minutes in other games and, show his skill at diving performances. Those were fantastic. But is he a guy that can run a little bit more consistently with that midfield to be the guy that's dishing the ball? And if he's serviceable, can we wait a little bit longer to find a Lucho replacement? Can we start the season with someone like Dado Valenzuela there? That's something I'm looking for. I don't know. We'll see what Pat Noonan does. We'll find out soon enough what he's looking for in these upcoming matches. Guys, thanks for joining me. My name's Brian Biedenbach. I don't think I introduced myself at the top of the show. Glad you're here. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week here on Cincinnati Soccer Talk.